Don't summon my jacket.
I didn't think about it.
Okay, I need your attention, okay? Just to pick up, I want to say something at the beginning of class because a question was asked yesterday. I think, a misunderstanding about the church's approach to this issue that we're discussing. In our faith, we hate the sin, but we love the sinner. No, we love the sinner. We love the person, but we hate the sin. We have to tell them if someone sins. And I'll just read a statement here by our present Pope, okay? Pope Francis. He says it would be an error to impose something on consciences of our brothers and sisters, but to propose to their conscience the truth of the gospel and salvation in Jesus Christ with complete clarity and total respect for free options which it presents is a tribute to freedom. So to Jesus, he says, I'm the way, the truth, and the life. And the truth will make you free. So if we proclaim the truth to people, this is going to help them to live with the truth and be truly free. True freedom is living in accord with God's laws as He designed us. This is a statement from Pope Benedict XVI, Pope Emeritus. He still lives in Rome. He's writing. I don't think he's published anything yet since he's been, I don't know if you call it retired, since he stepped down from the papal office. Okay. But he said this. He says, there's a need to acknowledge and promote the natural structure of marriage as the union of a man and a woman in the face of attempts to make it juridically or legally equivalent to different types of union. Such attempts actually harm and help to destabilize marriage, obscuring its specific nature and its indispensable role in society. He went on to say that these principles are not truths of the faith necessarily, but they are inscribed in human nature itself, accessible to reason, and thus common to all humanity. That's why in discussing this issue, we don't have to say, well, because we're Catholic, we have to take this position. No, we say this is part of our human nature. We appeal to human reason, and we hope to convince with reasonable arguments, okay? Because we're reasonable creatures. And I'll quote Pope Benedict again. This was back last September where he spoke these words. He says, in our times, anyone claiming to possess an immutable, unchangeable truth is automatically accused and dismissed. The question arises, how can one have truth? This is intolerance. If you're telling me you have the truth, you're intolerant of me. Well, he said no. He says, the law of God is wisdom. And I'll just quote here a bishop from the island of Corsica. He says this: opposing gay marriage is truth in love. It's not homophobia. Okay? It's not. We're not afraid of this. We're proclaiming the truth in love. We do it with love. Okay. And having said that, I just I'm going to hold up a book here that I came across. It makes 30 years now. Okay. This is a book which really got me interested in this whole issue. It's written by a Catholic priest, Father Enrique Rueda, called The Homosexual Network. And what he did, this is published in 1982, he did research in the 1970s and early 1980s on the network of different social forces working to change people's opinion and minds on this issue. And what he discovered in his research, and he has the documentation actually from the, you could say, pro-gay organizations themselves in the appendix of his book, their goal was to basically get in positions of power and authority in all the areas of society, in education, in medicine, in the media especially. And he said those who were promoting the gay agenda realized that if they were going to change people's opinions, the biggest obstacle to that is religion. So they had to get into positions of power in different religious organizations. And I don't know if you're aware of it, but the Catholic Church is really the only, one of the only institutions, religious institutions, that is holding the line on this issue and saying we can't depart from what reason tells us is the truth and what the gospel confirms is the truth. Okay, the Evangelical Lutheran Church of America, the Anglican Church, I mean they're marrying people of the same sex now. They're ordaining people to be ministers in their congregations who are openly homosexual. The Catholic Church is saying no, we can't do this. We have to hold the line on this. I read this book 30 years ago, and so I've been keeping my finger on the nerve on this issue for the past 30 years, and I just recently discovered, I didn't know there was published, a book. Basically, what Father Rouet discovered through his research, two pro-homosexual gay activist authors wrote on. It was kind of a textbook how to change society's thinking on this issue. And this is a picture of the actual book, which is titled "After the Ball: How America Will Conquer Its Fear and Hatred of Gays in the 90s." Okay, written by Marshall Kirk, Hunter Madsen, back in 1987. And in their book, they say this, and these are quotes from the book. The first order of business is desensitization of the American public, concerning gays and gay rights. You have to desensitize them. To help it view homosexuality with indifference instead of keen emotion. Make sexual preference placed on par with preferences like ice cream or flavors, ice cream flavors or sports. You prefer hockey, I prefer baseball, no problem. So to get people, they're not too concerned about this. That's the beginning to get the change taking place. At least in the beginning, they say, we are seeking public desensitization and nothing more. And then they say, forget about trying to persuade the masses that homosexuality is a good thing, but if you can only get them to think that it is just another thing with a shrug of their shoulders, then your battle for legal and social acceptance is virtually won. And then they give a number of steps how they're going to go about this. This was, mind you, back in 1987. Okay? So we can look back over the past 97, 2007, 20-some years, and with hindsight on this. Okay? First, talk about gays and gayness as loudly and as often as possible. That's their first step. Say the authors, almost any behavior begins to look normal if you are exposed to enough of it at close quarters. And they say the way to benumb the raw sensibilities of people about homosexuality is to have a lot of people talk a great deal about the subject in a neutral or supportive way. The impression is created that public opinion is at least divided on the topic. You can get all kinds of people to talk about it. Okay? They go on to say in the same step one, in the early stages, any campaign to reach straight America, the masses should not be shocked and repelled by premature exposure to homosexual behavior itself, because this will turn off people. Okay? Instead, the imagery of sex should be downplayed and gay rights should be reduced to an abstract social question as much as possible. And they stress the importance of having homosexual issues talked about in the visual media, film, television, which, to quote them, are the most powerful image makers in Western civilization. And at the time, in 1987, I don't know what the figures are now, the average American spent a good 7 hours or more in front of the television. And they say those hours are a gateway to the private world of straits, through which a Trojan horse may be passed. Okay? Hollywood is described by the authors as the best covert weapon to desensitize the mainstream. And they applauded in their book efforts in the last 10 years up to 1987 to have homosexual characters portrayed in a positive light in movies and television. Okay? They mentioned shows like Will and Grace, which ran for 15 years, Brokeback Mountain. As long as Joe Sixpack feels little pressure to perform, to go against this, then we're good, they say. Okay? And they go on to say that they lay out their full-scale assault on religion, while public opinion is one primary source of mainstream values. They say religious authority is the other. When conservative churches, like ours, okay, the Catholic Church, condemn gays, and we don't condemn gays, okay, we condemn the sin, okay, not the person. Okay. We forgive them. We want them to repent. Okay. But this is their view of things. When they condemn gays, there are only two things you can do to confound true believers. First, use talk to muddy the moral waters, publicizing support for gays by more moderate churches, raising theological objections of our own about conservative interpretation of biblical teaching. And second, we can undermine moral authority of homophobic churches, like ours is considered, the Catholic Church, okay, by portraying them as antiquated, backwards, badly out of step with the times, with the latest findings of psychology. Against the mighty pull of institutional religion, one must set the mightier draw of science and public opinion. Such an unholy alliance has worked well against churches before on topics such as divorce and abortion. So they knew that this was the tactic with getting people to accept abortion in a number of the denominations. That's step one. Step two, portray gays as victims, not as aggressive challengers. To quote them, in any campaign to win over the public, gays must be cast as victims in need of protection, so that straights will be inclined by reflex to assume the role of a protector. And in practical terms, they say this means that jaunty, mustachioed muscle men would keep a very low profile in gay commercials and other public presentations, while sympathetic figures of nice young people, old people, attractive women would be featured. Okay. That's how to get people's thinking on this change. They outline two different messages about the gay victim. First, the mainstream should be told that gays are victims of fate, that they never had a chance to accept or reject their preference because they were born that way. Now, I'm going to say this too. Based upon the research, my own experience in dealing with men, okay, and counseling them, and the good counselors who are reflected in the Catholic Medical Association report, okay, who counsel men, I would have to say, and they agree, that this is not something that people choose. The man I counseled who was abused, he didn't choose this. He didn't choose to have his sexual identity all confused. You know, someone who grows up with a mean, abusive father, and they don't have a good sexual identity of their maleness, for example, or their femaleness, okay? We can't say that they chose this, okay? But to help them understand the causes for it is what we try to do, the background to this. But the gay agenda wants to say that, you know, simply they were born that way, okay? Just as you were born homosexual or heterosexual or white or black or bright or athletic. Okay, so there's nothing you can do about it. Okay. Step 3, give protectors a just cause. Our campaign, they say, should not demand direct support for homosexual practices. Instead, take anti-discrimination as its theme, okay? Because they know the practices themselves would be revolting to people. It would turn them off. Okay? Step 4, make gays look good. Quote, in order to make a gay victim sympathetic to straights, you have to portray him as every man. But an additional theme, the campaign should paint gays as superior pillars of society. Yes, yes, we know this trick is so old it creaks. Other minorities use it all the time. But the message is vital for all those straights who still picture gays as queer people. Okay? So, step 5, make the victimizers look bad. Okay? And step 6, solicit funds. The buck stops here. Okay? So you want to get people on board financially to this. Okay? So this was something that they were outlining, they were strategizing on, going back into the 1980s. Okay? And I'm just going to return to, I was quoting Dr. Joseph Nicolosi. He's a medical doctor, okay, a psychologist who does reparative therapy. Okay? I was quoting him yesterday when he was talking about how the American Psychological Association has dropped its insistence that this is something biologically determined because the evidence isn't there. And he goes on to say that it's essential that we communicate to people that change is possible, okay? That men and women can come out of homosexuality. The idea of once gay, always gay is a political position, not a scientific position. And this is what the good Catholic counselors have found, okay? In bringing to light these environmental factors growing up. This could have happened to you, okay? This could be the reason for your same-sex attraction. And he said there is a need to assist and minister to men and women who are looking for help to come out of homosexuality. Because so many times they're told, you're born this way, you can't change, there's nothing you can do about it. And he says, as a counselor, as a therapist, he has to tell people, and we have to tell people, you don't have to be gay. You can change. Okay, this is possible. Okay, he says, if you know a homosexual person, encourage that person, give that person information, take the opportunity to let him know that choice is possible. He says the therapy is very hard. First of all, because you have to dig deep into emotional issues. Homosexuality, he says, is not about sexual issues, but emotional underpinnings that have to be addressed. When you do something with people and you're recalling things that, in their youth, okay, you dig these things up, you present them to people, you let them see that, okay, this is the genesis of this, okay? And then they can see, okay, now I can see this. I realize where this came from. Then, he says, the other battle is the culture that you're facing. Okay? You're homophobic, you're naive, you're not facing reality. Okay? And he said you have your individual battle. For example, with the AIDS epidemic, this is about life and death. I just read the latest figures from the Center for Disease Control. 94% of young men with AIDS are homosexuals. It's still a scourge, okay, amongst this category of men, especially young men. And Dr. Nicolosi says we have to inform people. He says it's amazing how many people are confused about this. He says we have to believe as Christians that you're intended for the opposite sex, sexual complementarity is part of the natural law. This should be evident to people. This is Christian anthropology, going back to what the Bible reveals, but what human reason can attain to. And he says that we have to go against the notion that you're made this way and there's no change possible. Now, I'm going to show a film today. This film I showed to my high school class, seniors in high school, in 1994. That's when this film was made in 1994. I got it as soon as it came out. And it's interesting to look back now almost 20 years later, because the themes that I've just spoken of, they're addressed in the film. And you'll see Dr. Nicolosi himself, okay, talking on the film. Okay. It was done by a Christian group, a non-Catholic group, I'll say, okay, and
Even some of Kenzie's partners in the study knew and now admit the report is flawed and inaccurate.
I'm going to stop here. There was a famous report done back in the 1960s by a man named Kinsey. He was investigating sexual practices of people. And now we've discovered that all his results were flawed. He was skewing information. And this is one of the men that worked with Kinsey, and that's how this starts out, because Kinsey claimed that 10% of the population is homosexual, which is just not in keeping with reality, okay? That's not true. And this is one of Kinsey's fellow workers who worked on the research with him and then was saying, he was playing with the numbers, okay?
Picked up things to make them startling and dramatic. Some sort of tablets of Moses or something.
So if it is not 10%, just how much is it? The most recent study was released just last year by the Alan Guttmacher Institute, concluding only about 1% of the total population is actually homosexual.
The truth is that homosexuals do not number 1 in 10, but rather slightly less than 1 in 100. Why then, you might ask, is the 10% myth being perpetuated? Because, according to one publication, it's part of a strategy to convince you that homosexuality being so widespread must be normal. Repeatedly, this notion is being expressed in the national media, in television programs like this one.
I can't just let him get married to just anybody. So do you love him?
I do, very much.
Well, good, because so do I.
You mean that, Blanche? Because Doug loves me for what I am, not for what he wants me to be or wishes I were.
And again, our dear John.
Rick, I didn't decide to turn gay. I mean, it's not like changing your hair color. I didn't know I was gay when we got married.
On Roseanne.
I'm going to tell you one more time. I'm gay. It has nothing to do with you or your masculinity.
Of course it doesn't. I'm still every bit the man I always was. Last night I beat up 3 guys in a topless bar to prove it.
I mean, you just don't get it. It's about love, trust, and commitment. What we have is not natural.
Come on, Coach. I may be gay, but I'm not stupid.
And the portrayal of homosexuals as normal and of heterosexuals as so-called homophobes is not limited to television entertainment programming. For example, here is a segment of an hour-long news program, NBC's First Person with Maria Schreiber.
I just look as good as I can.
See, that's so hard for someone like you. It's hard for me to understand you having romance with a man.
It's not just a physical, sexual kind of thing.
Sex was and is the smallest part of being gay.
But are the portrayals of monogamy and long-term relationships you see and hear really reflective of the homosexual lifestyle? Dr. Nicolosi, citing a study from homosexuals themselves, says absolutely not.
Gay researchers themselves have looked into these gay relationships, and they have come to the conclusion that these people cannot maintain sexual fidelity.
In study after study, research has found that the homosexual lifestyle choice is driven by sex, and that these sexual appetites are anything but normal and monogamous. One study, for example, cited by USA Today, shows homosexuals have an average of 50 different sexual partners each year. Another major study found 43% of white male homosexuals claim to have had sex with 500 or more different sex partners during their lifetime. 28% reported having more than 1,000 partners. 79% said more than half their partners were strangers.
100% of homosexuals engage in philalia, which is either insertive or receptive oral sex. About 93% engage in rectal sex, which is anal intercourse. And of course, the rectum was not built for intercourse. And so when you carry out anal intercourse, why you manage to tear the rectal mucosa, you expand the sphincters in many instances. It's not a healthy activity, and it's because you tear the rectal mucosa that there is such a high incidence of disease in these cases.
Okay. I'm going to just fast forward this. He goes into a number of other descriptive practices, which you can go online and read about it.
We call it playing on the edge. And so a lot of people that doesn't appeal to, but that can be a cutting, for scarification. It can be breath control, where you actually, you have a person's life in your hands. Heavy whipping suits that leave permanent scars. So that is a very normal, extreme end of SM.
We use rope. We use chains, we use whips, just like the people sort of make jokes about, but we use them in ways that bring people closer together rather than move people further apart.
I am into heavy play with whips, props, I like electricity.
Anything that you can find in a hardware store, we know how to play with real well.
All of this verifies homosexual behavior to be extremely different and unhealthy when compared to that which typifies heterosexual behavior. For example, the American Medical Association states homosexual youths are 23 times more likely to contract sexually transmitted diseases than are heterosexuals. Another example, lesbians and homosexual men are 19 times and 14 times more likely, respectively, to contract syphilis than heterosexual women and men. Homosexuals account for an overwhelmingly disproportionate number of cases of gonorrhea, hepatitis A, and hepatitis B. Homosexuals are approximately 5,000 times more likely to contract AIDS, and 50% of the homosexual male population is now estimated to be HIV positive. But perhaps the most telling statistic about the homosexual lifestyle is this. The average heterosexual male lives to age 74. The average homosexual male dies at 41. Sean is a former homosexual who, when interviewed, was dying of AIDS.
After a while, I knew this was abnormal. 23-year-old men with colostomy bags.
The tragic truth about the homosexual lifestyle is that it is driven more by lust than by the love we see presented on TV. The more accurate portrait of a homosexual is unfortunately more like that of Dennis, dying from AIDS on a lonely hospital bed.
I've had so many sexual partners that they're without number. At one point, I know that one night I had at least 50 different partners in one night.
The homosexual lifestyle is neither normal nor healthy. And if those who are teaching homosexuality to our children truly cared about their welfare, they would tell them the truth about the dangers of its practices. But my friends, the truth is not being told. In fact, it's being suppressed in public schools. And as you've just seen, in the national media as well. I'd like to conclude this part of the program by discussing two other widely circulated claims about homosexuality. One, that homosexuals are born gay, and two, that they cannot change.
Two highly publicized studies concluded there may be a genetic link to homosexuality. But again, the research was found to be faulty and biased.
There is no biological evidence, no scientific evidence for gay biological predetermination of homosexuality. The fallacy is that people are born gay. But my studies and my research with over 200 men has shown me that the real determinant is the poor relationship with the father. We have to remember that all children are first identified with the mother, but the boy has the additional developmental task of disidentifying with the mother and moving across and identifying with the father. This is what they call the gender identity phase. We're talking 2, 3 years old, okay? Now, if the father is warm and receptive and inviting, then the boy will leave the mother identification and bond with the father, and he'll develop a masculine identification. If the father is cold or distant or rejecting or uninterested, the boy will reach out to the father naturally, but he will get hurt and he will withdraw back to the mother and maintain his feminine identification.
In spite of the evidence that suggests homosexuality is not genetic, the homosexual position is that the homosexual cannot change.
That's certainly not true. And this is why the work that I do, reparative therapy, is such a challenge to the gay agenda.
And there are literally tens of thousands who have left the homosexual lifestyle and are leading happy heterosexual lives. But they first admitted they needed and then sought the necessary help. And they will tell you their hearts and minds were healed only through the power of Jesus Christ.
God has healed me of my homosexual attractions. God has healed me of that need for a heavy emotional bond, overtly emotional bond with other men.
Perhaps no story makes this point and is more touching than that of John and Anne.
I first went into the gay lifestyle. It filled all those needs for affirmation, for attention, what I perceived to be love. And for the first couple years, it was great. I had a relationship with someone that I met early on in that experience.
I had decided my first year in college that I was gay, period. I was a lesbian. And that I wanted to pursue lesbianism.
The relationship ended after a year. I went through a long period of depression. I dropped out of school. My drinking increased. And I started having anonymous sexual encounters with people I would just meet.
The extent of my exposure was beginning to be involved with the gay counselor on campus, and then going to those meetings, the gay and lesbian rap meetings.
My life was going down the tubes. I mean, I would go out and drag at night after I'd come home from the bar and walk the city street, try to get men to pick me up, and they would. Then I told my pastor I struggled with homosexuality, and I was on this rugby team and everything, and he told me, you know, Anne, you really have to make a decision too. And that night is when I decided, you know, homosexuality promises a little bit, but Jesus promises to always be there with me. And so I decided for him. I decided I'd throw all of that gladly away, and all that excitement of sexual fulfillment and all the rest. About 6 months after I stopped being a drag queen, I was working at a campus shop at Ohio State University, where I'd been going to school. And this campus pastor would come to the store all the time. For some reason, that when he would come to my store, I felt like I wanted to start just weeping, sobbing. And it was the strangest experience, because I thought, there's something that this man has that can help me. There's something that I need. And I didn't even know what it was. It was God that he had. And finally, I agreed to let him come and talk to me about God. And I remember him just telling me about God, that God was a loving person, that God was someone who really cared. And all of a sudden, my mind kind of woke up, and I said, God, I don't know how in the world you are going to get me out of homosexuality. I've never heard of this. I've never heard of anybody anywhere coming out of homosexuality. But that didn't so much matter to me. I just knew I wanted to serve God on His terms, not mine.
So I told God, I said, God, there's no way I'm going to turn away from this unless you help me. You have to do something.
Both John and Ann received help after enrolling in a year-long, biblically based live-in program to deal with the root causes of their homosexuality.
So when I closed the door to the past, again, all these things culminating into a whole individual, working on these things, my identity and parental issues and all these things, and over a period of four or 5 years, I started feeling heterosexual. I realized that God created a woman, that a woman was what I needed to fill me. It was not a man anymore.
I had to learn who I was, though, and that I was a woman, and that I was a valid woman, and that femininity was good. And I had a hard time learning. That was a hard area for me, that femininity did not equal weakness, but that it was blessed and it was protected and it was a safe place to be and it was okay. And as I learned these things and as I felt comforted in my heart and in the scriptures and with people around me and experiences, as I trusted a little bit more, my femininity started to blossom.
Today, John and Ann are happily married to each other. They aren't just two ex-homosexuals masquerading a married life. Their desires really have changed.
It was so exciting to me. My emotions were completely involved for the first time with a man. The whole thing just worked naturally, and I was thrilled with that too. I have to admit, part of it was that I was so thrilled that I was normal and I was having the emotions that I figured should have been going on this whole time, but it was natural. I didn't have to work anything up. I didn't have to try anything. I wasn't trying to fix myself. It just was happening.
Some people will say, well, you're married. Do you have a normal married relationship? Do you have sexual relations with each other? Are you physically attracted to her? And because I was going from a whole place of security, I was very attracted emotionally, and I was physically attracted, and I was sexually attracted. And it was really neat. It's like a flower blossoming in the spring. Things that were always lying dormant there were awakening in me.
Thousands of homosexuals today are struggling with their homosexual lifestyle and wish that there were a way out. However, sadly, most of these have been fed the lie that there is no way out. But as you've just seen, that is not true. There is a way out, and His name is Jesus Christ. And thousands have discovered freedom through Christ, and you can too. Jesus Christ alone can set men and women free from the bonds of sin, including homosexuality. And if you or someone you know is struggling in this area, I encourage you to call on Christ today. Acknowledge your sin and your need for Him, and turn over the control of your life to Christ. It's the only way to lasting peace. If you would like more information about freedom from homosexuality through Jesus Christ,
And just to follow up on follow up on the fact that change is possible. Okay. There was a study done. Just a couple of years ago, a longitudinal study. That means over a length of time. That's what makes it more validly scientific. And this was done by two psychologists from Wheaton College and from Regent University, who tracked individuals who sought to change their sexual attraction. Okay? And 98 candidates were assessed over a period of 6 to 7 years. After therapy, 23% actually changed their attraction from same sex to opposite sex. Those figures may seem insignificant, only 23%. Oftentimes the psychological and emotional difficulties that people face make it a challenge to change their sexual orientation, their attraction. Okay? Even Dr. Nicolosi admits this. He says, we can do this, we can have success with some people, but their problems are so deeply rooted, okay, that it's difficult. And they may go back and forth on this issue. The 23% were those who maintained their opposite sex attraction after therapy. The thing that we have to tell people is that, well, first of all, you're called to chastity. Okay? Everyone's called to be chaste. We can lead a chaste lifestyle. I have to do it. You have to do it. Everyone can do it. It's possible with Christ's grace. Okay? Very simple. I mean, that's what I tell them when they come to me in confession. That man you saw in the hospital bed, I've ministered to men like him. Okay? And just brought them hope. Say, Jesus can forgive you at this point of death. You're dying of AIDS. Okay? Christ can forgive you. Just say you're sorry, and you can get to heaven. Okay? Even though you've done all these horrible things for years, and that's what we do with our faith. We give people hope, and the reparative therapy is a way to give people hope when they're told that you're born this way and you can't change. No. Okay? Now, one further point on this idea of born that way and change not possible. Okay? The American Psychological Association recently, this is from August of 2013, has a group of psychiatrists, I should say, within the American Psychiatric Association, not psychological, okay, has called pedophiles minor attracted people. Okay? This is how they're classifying them. Okay? Minor attracted people. And what this is an attempt to do is to say, okay, if people with a same-sex attraction can be attracted to adults, well, then they can be attracted to minors as well. And the same argument follows. You're born that way, you cannot change, you're attracted to minors. In 1998, the American Psychiatric Association issued a report claiming that, quote, the negative potential of adult sex with children was overstated, and, quote, the vast majority of both men and women reported no negative sexual effects from childhood sexual abuse experiences. Now, my experience as a county prosecutor, prosecuting cases with child sexual abuse, I would just say this is totally false. Okay, this is on the agenda to have a further acceptance of not only the so-called gay lifestyle, but saying that, well, people who are attracted to minors this is just their natural inclination. Okay? Every year, in the New York Gay Parade, the North American Man-Boy Love Association marches along with everyone else. Their slogan is, "Sex after 8 is too late." Yeah. They are allowed to march in the homosexual parade in New York every year. The leaders of the movement don't object to this. Okay? In other words, they're accepting of this. Okay? And here's just another piece on the same issue. Okay? A psychiatrist, Dr. James Kincaid, actually, okay, he's a professor of English at Southern California University. And he said this: if the child is desirable, then to desire it can hardly be freakish. To maintain otherwise is to put into operation pretty hefty engines of denial and self-deception. In other words, okay, we just have to accept it if people are attracted to minors, if they're attracted to little boys and little girls. This is something natural. Well, we have to oppose these types of agendae and say, no, we're going to tell you the truth. We're going to do it gently and charitably, but firmly and clearly, and courageously. I add the last adjective because in Canada right now, where the gay agenda has really taken hold, more so than here in regard to the laws, there have been pastors, Protestant ministers who have been called before human rights commissions for preaching a homily or a sermon saying that homosexuality is a sin. In Europe, just last year, there was a Spanish bishop. He gave a homily, and he listed a number of things as sins. He listed among them, this wasn't just a homily about attacking homosexual sodomy, but he mentioned homosexual sodomy as a sin. He was called before a human rights commission in Europe. How dare you say this? They classified it as hate speech. If you speak against this, if you call this a sin, it's hate speech. Okay? I've come across numerous articles from LifeSite News which tell how, for example, people who work in the entertainment industry, on their private emails, if they send an email to someone saying that they disagreed with the gay agenda, they were fired from their jobs. This is the dictatorship of relativity. Okay? You can never say anything against anyone else. This is wrong. This is you're being intolerant. Well, no, we don't tolerate sin. We have to speak the truth, and this is what we do in the church. We do it gently and charitably, but firmly and clearly, okay? and if need be, courageously. We don't condemn the person, we condemn the sin, and we try to call people out of sin into leading a good life, just as we would anyone. Okay? So this is how we have to respond to that agenda when we come face to face with it. And this is the reason why I'm spending a couple of days on this topic, because your generation is going to face the brunt of this issue. This is the heart of the culture war right now. Okay? I'm going to make a prediction, because I've said this from the pulpit in my parishes, that one day soon the Catholic Church is going to lose its tax-exempt status on this issue. Because the government is going to say, you are unjustly discriminating against people not being willing to marry them. Because we won't. We can't. And so they'll say, well, you lose your tax-exempt status. You will be taxed like any other institution. Okay? I predict that that's going to happen. And it may even happen that someone may look at what I'm saying today on the camera and call me before a legal court and accuse me of hate speech and even take other legal actions against me. Okay? I can see this on the horizon. Okay? That's where this issue is going. That's why I've taken the time to explain it to you, because you have to know how to articulate the truth and respond to the agenda. And having said that, I'll turn to Jet because I know he had a question yesterday.